This is a special edition of the Money Story podcast. I am actually going to tell you a story. And the story has come about almost unexpectedly. A few things have kind of come together and some ideas have connected. And I thought I would explain some more context around it, but I think I'm actually going to just get into the story. I'm going to tell the story and let you reflect on it and have thoughts that come up as we go. And then I'm going to explain some of the context and some of the frameworks around it that are tied into it. It's worth mentioning also that there is, and I've realised this afterwards, there is a lunar eclipse that has just happened alongside the full moon, and it is a very a time of reflection and introspection and almost like holding a mirror up and doing the inner work. And this is an invitation really to consider that. Even if you're listening to this afterwards, this is the energy in which this is kind of emerged. If you are into all of that stuff, that's great. If you are not so familiar with moon cycles and energies and things, I just invite you to be curious around what the symbolism and ideas could mean. This is not about the moon, by the way, so I think it's best if I just get into the story and then I'm going to talk through a bit around it afterwards. So as a caveat, it is a story about money. So just to inform you that there are topics around money being discussed, and get comfortable. And I look forward to sharing with you. Let's get into the story. A strange gathering. It's the kind of country pub that never really changes. Most nights you'll find the regulars propped up at the bar, half chatting, half listening, just passing the time. A family are chattering away together with the obligatory Labrador at their feet, tucked under the table as they enjoy a simple supper. None of that gastropub stuff here. This is the heartbeat of the village, friendly sure, but the sort of sleepy place where anyone who looks a bit different will certainly receive a glance or two. Beth slips in with a tentative smile, a nod to a familiar face. In her comfy big jumper and favourite jeans, she keeps her head down, trying to avoid any small talk. She doesn't have the energy for it. Because the guests she's about to meet, the parts of her that usually stay hidden, are going to be anything but subtle. As Beth is ushered to the table she's booked around the corner, the steward smiles at her warmly, already settled in, sipping tea. Everything about the steward is composed, dependable, inevitable. Hair braided neatly, not a strand out of place. Her features luminous, symmetrical, order itself. The steward embodies the consistency of Hestia, Greek goddess of the hearth, the patience of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and the strength, life-giving and sustaining energy of Bridget, Celtic goddess of healing and protection. Even though the steward would ordinarily tend another century, her presence anchors the space. A gust of wind through the open door, and Wild Body has arrived. She brings the weather along with her, as though they are one. Hair tangled and wild, cheeks flushed, eyes wide, striding in muddy boots. The chatter falters, somebody tuts at the mud and leaves that trail behind her. She doesn't notice or doesn't care. Wild Body carries the instincts of Artemis, the earthiness of Gaia, the fierce protectiveness of Kali, the raw sensuality of Aphrodite unmasked. Wild Body drops into the seat beside Beth with a sigh. Smelling of rain and soil, the sing-song of the forest itself. Behind Beth, the sage emerges from a dark corner, a frightening jolt, as though crossing from another realm. Poised, eyes sharp with firelight, robes the colour of ink, hair long and silver-threaded. She belongs to grand ancient temples and shadowy caves, not a modest country pub. But here she is. Beth feels her presence both in awe and anticipation, for the sage carries the strategy of Athena, the liminal wisdom of Hecate, the prophecy of the Morrigan. After a while, there is a commotion. The Trickster. Oh, she's finally arrived. And don't we know it? The door bangs open, shrill laughter permeates. She sweeps in, dazzling, far too bright for a Tuesday night in a locals pub. With the shimmer of Lakshmi, Hindu goddess of abundance, she's always ready to spin the wheel of chaos and spontaneity, like Fortuna, Roman goddess of chance. And she represents the sly cunning of Coyote, boundary breaker, always ready to turn the game upside down. Scarves trail, bangles chiming, she's mesmerising, captivating, the kind of presence that makes the whole room tilt towards her energetic energy. Revelling in the glances, she pauses at the bar, no doubt to order something outrageous, trying to derail your agenda with decadence and bubbles before she comes over to hijack your table and your imagination. Fire warms your backs. The low beams and stone walls make the space feel close, almost intimate. It's cosy, and yet despite the steady hum of conversation, there are sidelong looks, awareness that this novel and strange gathering you are hosting is unprecedented. 4 women who don't belong surround Beth, too careful, too raw, too shadowed, too loud. Beth tugs her sleeves tighter, painfully aware but trying to pass as unremarkable in the middle of them. It's futile, the mask has slipped. But even as Beth's cheeks flush under the weight of the local stare, something in her loosens, because however out of place these women are here, they feel like home. Of course they do, because they are part of Beth. I want to talk about money. For a moment, Beth just soaks it in, their presence so fierce, so alive, it almost takes your breath. As the trickster chats away, then Beth clears her throat. What she's been waiting tentatively to say for so long, it comes out, more sure than it feels inside. I want to talk about money. The table erupts. The steward leans forward first, suddenly commanding the space, hushing the trickster's chatter. Her voice clear and absolute. Bethany, I have rituals to share, practices of tending, of keeping things in their place. Without order, nothing survives. We must begin there. Her words carry the weight of liturgy, not suggestion. But before she can continue, the trickster cuts across. Oh, for heaven's sake, must we always be so solemn? We're together at last. This is cause for celebration. She tosses her head. Let's move somewhere more alive, where the music plays, where there's dancing. Let's make a night of it. The wild body shifts in her seat, restless and fidgety. Why sit indoors at all? She mutters. The lake is close by. The woods are waiting. We should walk, stretch, breathe. Let the night air speak to us. Talk under the stars, not in this cramped place. And the sage, she says nothing. She only watches. Eyes half shadowed in the firelight, her chin resting on her hand. Beth can feel her mind already spinning, hypotheses forming, threads being drawn tight. She doesn't speak, but her silence brims with knowing. Beth aches to ask what she sees, but dreads it at the same time. The voices rise, overlapping, ritual, revelry, adventure, unspoken truth. The quiet pub grows ever more uneasy. People are surely watching this rowdy scene. Overwhelm swells in Beth's chest. It's too many voices, too much at once. She raises her hands, smiling despite herself. One at a time, please. She stutters. She pauses. Look, this is too much. I want to hear from each of you in turn. Slowly they fall quiet. The steward. Her eyes meet Beth's. You need order, she says. What is not tended dies. She enforces to you how tending is not just on Beth's own account. It is theirs too. Beth's family, Beth's friends, Beth's community. If Beth's fire falters, her community, her family, her friends will too. So you must pay, cover, give, take responsibility, because somebody must. The words land heavy, stark, extreme, the kind of truth that made sense in the steward's world, where neglect means hunger and cold. Living in tune, yes, but governed by the seasons, the harvest, the responsibilities. And that's exactly how she feels inside Beth's mind too. Absolute, uncompromising. It's the fear beneath every unopened bill, every abandoned budget. The message is, if you don't keep up, you're unsafe. And yet Beth aches for what the steward represents. This is the part of Beth that buys the stationery, the planners, the colour-coded tabs, that sets up money pots, one for bills, one for taxes, and so on. That builds a perfect spreadsheet or tries that new app that everyone's raving about, thinking, maybe this will finally hold me. She also reminds Beth of herself before. When once she seemed to manage everything, the high-pressure job, the stacked, complex and endless responsibilities, the way people would ask out loud in wonder, how does she do it all? Despite how Beth felt inside, she just kept tending because there was no choice, until she couldn't. The dependable self is part of Beth too, and it feels painful now, that memory when things have seemingly slipped through her hands, because the moment the shine wears off, the weight of the steward pressed down on weary shoulders, order became suffocating. The very thing that promised safety left Beth paralysed. The steward's presence is double-edged. Beth longs for her steadiness, but the effort to hold it all feels impossible. Too much, all at once. Beth tells her softly, I want what you bring. I crave it. But when you are so heavy to carry in this life, when you rise in me, I want to do everything perfectly. And when I can't, I do nothing at all. And it becomes clear. The steward is both the steadiness and the stuckness. The part of Beth craves structure, resists it, abandons it, and then longs for it again. The part that once carried everything. The wild body. Next, Beth turns to wild body. She is already tucking into a hearty meal, bypassing the cutlery, gripping a chunk of meat, tearing it with her teeth as she chews noisily, sighing with deep satisfaction despite people's horrified glances and mutterings. Beth feels the weight of the judgment as though it's hers. They're viewing her as too primitive, too messy, too much. But wild body doesn't falter. She licks the juices from her fingers, wipes her mouth with the back of her hand. Her hunger is her truth. And that's the mirror. Wild body trusts herself utterly. Her hunger, her tiredness, her instincts. She honours them without question. And this is the part of Beth that's been called too much, too messy, too unfit for the pace of modern life. The part Beth learned to hide. With money, this shows up as the freeze, the fog, the collapse, when the numbers feel too heavy. The days when tasks are undone because Beth's body says stop. The survival mode nestled in food, warmth, small comforts, bad telly, because that is what felt safe and present. The wild body looks at Beth, with eyes like a cat, ancient, primitive, wild. You need to rest, she says. Follow your natural state. Listen to yourself. Stop pushing past the body's knowing. And it lands with Beth. Because wild body is right, of course. But it's unbearably hard. Honouring this makes Beth's wisdom feel like failure. Too slow, too much, not enough. She's learned that listening to her needs means you're weak. It means you're indulgent or irresponsible. That shutting down is shameful. Time is money. That's what they say. Beth had turned away from the instincts of wild body, fighting her, masking her, until she dragged her into collapse anyway. Beth whispers, I long for your honesty, but when you come strong, I lose everything, I collapse. Wild body shrugs, tearing another piece of me, gaze unflinching. Then honour me sooner, hear me when I whisper, not only when I roar. Rest before collapse, feed yourself before starvation. Trust your instincts, they are older than money, older than shame. My way is simple, even when your world is not. And now Beth sees her clearly, the wild, instinctive part of herself, the inner child who trusted herself before she was taught to conform. Too messy for polite society, too honest and in tune with herself for capitalism, but also the part that still knows how to survive. The Trickster. Next, Beth turns to the Trickster. In honesty, she is putting off hearing what the sage has to say, and would prefer to be distracted, entertained even, by the Trickster's tales. Instead, she receives another important and illuminating insight. The Trickster leans in, bracelets chiming, her voice more serious than ever. Why do you starve me? She demands. Life wants movement. Money wants to flow. I want to say yes, always yes. Buy the dress, throw the party, book the flight, tip too much. Give it away, let it sparkle. What good is it locked up, lifeless in your accounts? And Beth's heart leaps, recalling how dazzling it is to be in the company of the Trickster. She's the rush of generosity, the thrill of spontaneity, the bright burst of dopamine when she clicks buy. She makes life vivid and joyous. Beth's stomach knots too, as she recalls what follows. The crash, the regret, the shame of overspending, of debt, of panic in the quiet after the party. She is unbridled joy, but also downfall in the same breath. Beth whispers to the Trickster in dismay. You are brilliant. You make life feel worth living. But you leave me with nothing to stand on. You spend, you revel as if it's nothing. And then I'm the one who has to face it when the sparkle fades. The Trickster responds, defensive. Then don't leave me starving. I won't be caged. I refuse. Give me what's mine. A purse for play. Keep me alive. Bring me with you. And Beth knows she's right. The Trickster is pained to shrink down to fit the rules. Always too much. But she is joy itself, both Beth's light and her undoing. The Trickster part needs space to thrive, but boundaries too. The Sage. With much apprehension, Beth is now poised to hear from the Sage. Bethany, you cannot pretend, says the Sage, her voice low, ominous, leaving a dangerous pause. Beth holds her breath, wondering what will come next. if she should respond. The sage continues, "The numbers tell a story. What do you make of it? What is the truth?" And Beth's stomach drops, because this is how the sage always feels to her. The sage sees almost too much. The part of Beth that notices every pattern, every injustice, every flaw in the system. The part that reads meaning into every purchase, every pound, spent or lost. The sage is the voice that asks, "What does this overdraft say about you? What story does your debt tell? Why can you spend freely on others but not save for yourself? Who did you learn this from?" Both unbearable and brilliant, the sage carries deep wisdom. She shows Beth the root of her relationship with money, the cultural wounds, the inherited patterns, but she also makes things feel impossibly tense and frightening. What could be a simple spreadsheet becomes a moral reckoning. What could be an accidental late bill becomes a spiral of shame. She sees it all, and she won't let Beth look away. Beth responds, "You are right, but you make it too much. I can't face it when you flood me with meaning. I freeze, I avoid." The sage's gaze does not soften, but she does speak more gently now. "You mistake weight for blame. I do not condemn you, I witness you. I ask the questions you try not to ask. But if you hold me alone, of course it is too much." And she sees the sage clearly. The part of Beth that reads deeply into money, that feels the shame and the weight of the story in every damn money interaction, what it means about her. The part that can paralyse Beth with overthinking, but also the part that carries her deepest truth, full of wisdom and knowing. The reckoning. The steward part wants Beth safe, dependable, and enduring. The trickster part wants her joyous, spontaneous, and alive. The wild body part wants her rested, fed, free. The sage part wants her curious, wise, and intuitive. Each of them brilliant, each of them also unbearable. Held alone, they can overwhelm Beth. Together, they begin to resemble a compass, the whole psyche. Beth leans back in her chair, the fire throwing long shadows of her compass across the wall. Locals still glance her way at this strange, wild council gathered in their unassuming pub. But Beth is too engrossed now to notice. At the surface, of course, she feels awkward, a little too much, and yet here, with all of them, with her mask lowered, Beth feels strangely, intensely, but beautifully seen. A human sitting with her many selves. Each one is a mirror, holding up a part of Beth that she's wrestled with, often alone. And seeing them side by side, circled around the heavy oak table, something shifts in her chest, a loosening, a kind of relief. These weren't flaws or failures or proof that she's bad with money. They are parts of her. Reflections. Dazzling, insistent, protective. Trying in their own ways to help Beth survive and thrive in a world that doesn't make room for all that she is. Yes, the voices can be overwhelming. The steward's weight, the trickster's abandon, the wild body's raw hunger, the sage's unblinking gaze. But maybe that's not because they're wrong. Maybe that's because they shine too brightly, too intensely, too wildly for the systems and narratives that usually hold Beth. They prefer dimness and detachment. And maybe the point isn't to make these parts responsible for everything, or to force them to fix or decide what's next. Perhaps it's simply that this state of being, in conversation, is the point of it all. When Beth can identify them, and how they fit together. Not just as their burden, but as their gift, as parts of a whole. They soften, they temper each other. The brilliance and ruin is no longer so crushing. It becomes company, direction, perspective, balance. Beth wonders, what would it be like to live with the steward, the wild body, the trickster and the sage, in conversation, as a council, not a chaos, to sit among them, not in fear, but in dialogue, to take their guidance with curiosity, with empathy, and yes, sometimes a little pushback and a pinch of salt, without handing them the whole weight of her life. Of course, Beth still has many more questions than answers, but she feels both seen and a lot less spirally. As she curiously examines and converses with these wonderful women, her parts, her psyche, what emerged tonight needed saying, oh, it's been a long time coming. I hope you enjoyed listening to that, and if anything is coming up for you right now, I would invite you to take a breather, to take care of yourself, to nourish yourself, and always pause this and come back later if you need to kind of move, get out in the fresh air, enjoy a nice cup of tea, etc. For the second part of this podcast, I'm going to talk a bit more about, I thought I'd just get into the story because it's kind of evocative just to tell the story, and then I'm going to tell you the story behind the story. And this is something that I first put together, and you may sense this from some of the examples I've used, but in relation to ADHD, money, and the wild mind of the psyche. So I'm going to get into some of those elements now, and essentially this is a kind of story experiment with what's called the wild mind. It's an offering that might speak to money, complexity, and the many voices we carry. Something that I hear a lot is in conventional business and money and stuff and the general kind of world of things, is there's talk about like finding your true north, your guiding star. It's like once you find the thing and you know what you're going after, everything becomes clear, and there's this idea of being like armed with courage, conviction, and a compass, and you kind of conquer the world and claim your destiny. It's sometimes called the hero's journey, and it's almost like as long as you have enough dedication and discipline, you can be the hero. But not all stories unfold like this. In other, more indigenous cultures, wisdom is found less in the individual and more in the collective. Thinking about councils of elders, circles of grandmothers, community where no single voice is enough on its own. And in business, we echo this to some extent, with a liberal sprinkle of patriarchy very often. But when you think about it, we gather in boards, we have committees, panels of advisors. Each role brings their own perspective, their own lens, their own truth. And decision makers in business listen. They weigh up, they balance, because it's a meeting of these voices that creates the direction, the possibility, and the change. No one voice is alone when we come into business decisions. I'm talking here about, you might be thinking, but it's just me or it's a small team. I'm talking about business as when we talk about boards and bigger, some smaller businesses as well, but often larger companies, the way that they make decisions. It's not always down to one person. We have a table and we have C-suite, sometimes it's called, and different people have different voices. And here, the decision makers listen, they weigh up, they balance, because it's the meeting of the voices that creates the direction and possibility. It's not one voice alone. And what if your psyche worked like that too? When it comes to money and your brain and your mind and your soul and all of that stuff, making sense of things maybe isn't just about finding a single true north. It's about being in collaboration with, but not overruled by, your own internal council or committee. I was listening to a podcast earlier this week where the compass of the wild mind came up. It was the Accidental Gods podcast with Sarah McFarland. And what was mentioned was this compass of the wild mind. I'd recommend you check out the podcast. It's a brilliant podcast. And this is what kind of struck me as this was kind of being explained, it's an approach, and it was part of the whole episode basically, but it just struck my attention and I went off and researched the compass of the wild mind. So the approach comes from the work of Bill Plotkin, who mapped the psyche into 4 archetypal directions in his book Wild Mind. I haven't actually read it myself, but the idea of like 4 internal compass points and the archetypes like sparked like a lot of thoughts and dots connecting in my mind. And I was thinking especially about like how our inner parts show up around money, and this is obviously for everybody, and there's lots of different elements to sort of neurodivergence. But something that was striking me in particular, which is where I've maybe heightened some of the examples that I used in the story, was around ADHD. Now, this might be something that relates to you. It might be something you've got diagnosed. It might be something you're curious about or exploring. It might not be at all. That's just another flavour, another angle on this, essentially. And what this might look like in terms of parts, in how we essentially as well, the parts I'm speaking to here is kind of around just the intensity of feelings and that kind of perspective. So the way that we can be kind of pulled in many directions at once, stuck in cycles of overgiving, overspending, shutting down around money. And this thought experiment emerged in my mind, one that I thought might be useful to share or explore or to play with, which is what I've done with the story. And if we go back to, so I haven't looked loads into the compass of the wild mind, but essentially just to give you a little bit of background, and I'd be really interested if it's something you're interested in already or you know about, and I'll probably go and research it some more myself. But basically, instead of things pointing to places on maps, each direction points to a part of ourself. Each direction holds like an archetype. So each one has gifts, each one has shadows. There's the north, which is the nurturing, generative adult kind of vibes. The east, which is kind of innocent, trickster, muse, divine child. South is the wild, indigenous one, the wild child. And the west is the dark muse, beloved, the sage. Each direction holds a facet of who we are, with its own wisdom, its own extremes. Plotkin describes the compass as a way of orientating ourselves, not a map of flaws or pathology, but a map of wholeness. There's an interesting, if you like Google or what web browser you use, there's something called the map of interpersonal view of the self and subpersonalities, which is to do with compass of the wild mind, and it plots these 4 things, and it shows you like the inner and outer thing. It's like the shadow and the outward thing, so it's like the 2 sides to it, them being slightly problematic for us and challenging, and also the bit that shines and stuff. So the idea of this is the compass can be a guide for kind of healing and for coming home to ourselves, a way of asking, when life feels overwhelming, which part of me is speaking now? It's a way of remembering you are more than whichever voice is loudest right now. I am quite interested in the idea of kind of what's called internal family systems, which is when you sort of look at parts of yourself, which is probably linked quite strongly to this. So if parts work is something you've come across, then this is kind of related, I suppose. And this is how it kind of unfolded to me in relation to, neurodivergency, money, people dealing with money basically. And you'll probably tell from the story that I've split that into 4 vivid archetypes. And again, this isn't prescriptive, this is just me playing around with ideas and like, what do I know, all I'd say is if it makes sense to you in some way, have an experiment with it. But I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not an expert on anything to do with psychology and all that. I just find it interesting. So we've got the north, which is the steward, which you'll recognise from our story, the order, the tending, the continuity. We've got the east, which is the trickster, the playful, impulsive, dazzling. South is the wild body, the instinctive, raw and untamed. The west is the sage, deep-seeing, truth-telling, shadow uncoverer. So those are our guests from our evening in the pub. They're 4 archetypes with 4 distinct energies. Together they form the whole psyche, which I kind of sense could illuminate a mirror for us. some stuff about money, basically. So this is kind of an invitation then to play a bit more with this imagination experiment. I wanted to just talk a little bit about specifically, and obviously lots of things overlap and all of that, but just about sort of ADHD and money. And this is talking from some of my own personal experience. Some of it is what I've seen, heard, imagined. Some of it's a bit more creative as well. What I'm trying to say is this is not prescriptive. Like, this is just some things that sometimes show up around money. It's not like that if you've got ADHD, these are what you will experience, because we're all different. And it's not saying that if you relate to them that means you've got ADHD or you haven't, or like, I'm just putting it out there that I don't necessarily take what resonates and leave the rest. And if you, yeah, I'm just going to talk about the thing now. So this is about why money can feel unbearable sometimes. And before we get into that, so what is it about money and ADHD? So money with ADHD isn't about it just being a bit tricky. It can sometimes feel unbearable. It's kind of sick in the stomach feeling when the post piles up and you can't face opening it. I'm trying not to get too triggering with the, I'm trying to be really careful, and that's probably a little bit like putting people into the uncertain place, but I'm going to try and keep it a bit lighter. So that the bright, capable part of you that can run a whole business, a household or a role, but collapses sometimes around something that seems like a simple form. The rush of joy and generosity when you say yes, and then the sting of regret a day later. The fog that descends when someone says just make a budget and you can't even begin. It doesn't add up. You can be brilliant, creative, resourceful, yet seemingly undone by a banking app screen or a money conversation. And we have to remember this isn't only about you or inadequacies. We live in a culture built on capitalism, consumerism, individualism, systems that demand discipline, productivity, endless linear growth, systems that reward rigidity and punish difference. If your brain works differently in any way at all, and could be wider than what we've talked about, if you respond to play, movement, dopamine, softness, collective care, the systems don't just fail to fit sometimes, and they can grind against you, essentially. It can feel difficult. And this can be much wider than ADHD. I'm just, putting that out there. So that the systems shout to you, you should, you must, why can't you? Almost on cue, I was listening to when I was writing. And this is just a little snippet to sort of enhance the experience with. I was listening as I was writing this story and this thing together. A song that was like playing on shuffle or whatever. That's playlisty thing. It was In Plain Sight, which is by Self Esteem and Moonchild Sanelli. And I just have a listen because it's very like mirror work, like very much like introspection, looking, holding a mirror to your parts kind of language. It was like, yeah, the lyrics are really evocative, I would say, and it's quite it was apt that it came up. So I'd go and have a look at them, and I'll just read some of the lyrics. I'm not going to read them all because like copyright or something probably means I can't, and I'm not going to sing them, just so you know. So, all alone in a crowd, adorned yet nervous, scared to speak, I shrink to keep the peace, hoping I don't shake my purpose, internally feeling like I'm broken pieces. It's actually a very uplifting, empowering song and all that stuff, but it's very feely. And I think the lyrics were echoing some of this kind of money experience. So all I'd say is it's no wonder money spirals can feel like shame, collapse and failure. But what if you're not failing at all? What if money is showing you which part of you is speaking the loudest? That's what I'm coming back to. So this is the experiment, and the story that I wrote was my experiment with this concept. And as I said, I'm using, some of them are my examples of things that I've experienced maybe, or I've experienced working with people, but like no one in particular, so I'm not calling anybody out. This is just a general thing. And I'm not a therapist, not a psychologist, or like any sort of specialist on ADHD or neurodivergence. So I'm just playing around with ideas and saying, what do you think? Take it or leave it. If you like it, great. If not, look at something else and consult a professional. I feel like I have to disclaimer it, but these are just I'm just talking about ideas really and explaining the process behind the story. Yeah, I'm a finance person. I'm a tentative storyteller today. So yeah, there we go. And in terms of my own like neurodivergence, I'm not totally sure. About myself, but I relate to a lot of this stuff, so there we go. I think there's some stuff going on there, but yeah. So and also I just want to say, like, I was drawn to picturing the 4 archetypes as women, but they don't have to be for you. They can be however they like appear for you. I am done myself with like finance being narrated by the usual kind of patriarchal bro trope kind of thing. So I was really like, I want to hear some hearth-keeping, glamorous tricksters, wild bodies, ominous shadow keeper women who carry the mess, the pain, the wild, the joy, the wisdom. And I related to it as archetype shaped by the wisdom carried in women's stories. And at the same time, like, I mean this like inclusively, so I mean this for all women, for anyone socialized or resonating with the archetypal currents, including like trans and non-binary folks. So by me imagining these as women, I'm trying to not be inclusive, if that makes sense. I'm just explaining how I got there, but I'm saying this if you want to have a go with this, expand it to whatever comes up for you. Yeah, and it was the idea of like what would they be like if they came together as a council, of their strong opinions and their wisdom and their messaging, and how it might be quite strange coming into your world if you've been trying to mask, basically. So that's where the story came from. And then the bit that I wanted to, just scrolling on my notes, so there's kind of like the invitation here, if you want to play around with this, is to meet your own council. Like, what to you is, and you might change the names of them and what they mean and what they symbolise, but like the steward, the trickster, the wild body, the sage, however they appear for you in whatever form and archetype. And to gather them in whatever feels safe for you, as a thought experiment, as a meditation, as a journal entry, as a letter, or even just daydreaming and thinking about it subconsciously. And you know, like that was quite intense, that story, because they met all together. And that's quite a lot. And our little person in the story, Beth, got quite overwhelmed by them all there together and talking over each other. So I'd say also for us, we don't have to meet them all at once. We could begin with just one. So questions you might want to ask, like, what do they want to say to you? What do you want to say to them? How do you feel in their company? These are just some prompts if you're journaling on it. Which one feels loudest right now? Which one feels quieter? What could you forgive yourself for? Sitting with them if you are doing this. Go as gently as you need. Nothing like to fix all at once. Sometimes it's more important just to notice them. Notice what they have to say. Notice what's coming up. That's as important as like rushing ahead to fix it and sort it and all of that stuff. And the whole thing really, sorry, my dog's barking. Yeah, so the whole thing is like, maybe a message from this is when money spirals hit, this default story can feel like what's wrong with me? Why is this happening? And this archetypal compass offers a different question, is like, who's speaking? Who's speaking? Which part of me is that coming from? What are they trying to protect me from? What's their perspective? And noticing that it's a part, it's not the whole. Also, what I think could be interesting is like how they respond to each other. So like if the trickster is running the show, can we invite the steward to set a soft boundary without like killing the spark? If the steward is like clamping down too much, can the trickster like give them a teaspoon of colour or fun money? If your wild body is collapsing, can the steward cancel something out of the diary and the sage kind of give the blessing for that? if the sage is pulling you under, borrow some of the steward's like ritual and the wild body's breath to sort of surface and take stock and give yourself some space. And essentially, yeah, the council helps because it widens the room, it gives you more chairs, more voices, more ways through, and perhaps next time something flares with money, rather than going like to war with yourself, you can go to the country pub in your mind, sit down in the corner, let them arrive, ask one good question and listen, vent, inquire. So you don't have to walk away from this with like answers, you don't need to change anything today. It might just be enough to know that these archetypes, brilliant, difficult, protective, wise, are part of you, not the whole of you. And next time money feels sharp or overwhelming, perhaps consider the council waiting at the table. Perhaps let one of them speak. Perhaps you will address them. Or ask them to shut the fuck up, because sometimes they need to do that as well. So if you've made it this far, I really hope you've enjoyed this, found it useful. Hopefully it's not too heavy, although I appreciate it's a heavy topic. So like maybe do something relaxing, fun, stretch your legs, nourish yourself. And I would love to know if you did enjoy this, if it resonates, if it was helpful, because I feel like I have gone on a bit of a tangent with myself. I feel like it is because of this full moon eclipse thingy on the go. I'm going to lean into that's the energy around it. But I will leave you with those thoughts.